psychology studies can be dated far back into history, and many different ideas have been rooted in its development. Here, we take a brief look at some of the components that made cognitive psychology what it is today. We'll begin with experimental psychology, and within that, we will take a brief look at behaviorism. Behaviorism aimed to focus on observable actions in response to stimulus without including the thought process that also played a role in those actions. John B. Watson was a lead psychologist in the subject and era, and he believed that the idea of the subconscious was subjective and should be excluded in studies as it could not be scientifically observed and measured. But as time progressed, psychologists began to recognize the importance of studying the internal process that occurs in order to obtain a true understanding of cognition. This is where Gestalt psychology begins to develop. Gestalt psychology argued that thinking and inner mental processes must be included in studies in order to truly grasp what cognition is. It proposed the idea that we add to our perception based on our knowledge. Popular psychologists who played a major role in the development of Gestalt psychology were Max Wertheimer, Wolfgang Kohler, and Kurt Koffka. Gestalt psychology has some principles called the Gestalt laws. They consist of the law of similarity, the law of pragnance, law of proximity, law of continuity, law of closure, and the law of common region. The law of similarity states that we group items that are similar together. The following images are an example of this principle. In the first image, we see 9 different squares with 3 different patterns. The squares are grouped together based on their patterns. Similarity can be categorized by shape, size, or color, among other characteristics. Then we have the law of pragnance, which states that we make simpler images out of more complex images. We can perceive dots or dashes as different shapes, as opposed to just a group of dots or dashes. In the following images, we see an example of this law. In the first image, we can see a square and a circle, as opposed to a flat image made up of different lines. The second image is a little more complex. Instead of seeing a bunch of shapes, we can make out the image to be a giraffe. The law of proximity states that people tend to consider things that are within close proximity to each other as a group, as shown in the following examples. In the first image, we see 3 separate groups of black circles. In the second image, we see 3 different groups of blue circles, except for the last group, which has a different shape at the bottom left. We still consider this shape part of the third group because it's within close proximity of the last bunch of circles. The law of continuity states that we perceive 2 different things that are connected as continuous, as opposed to 2 different interrupted components, like the lines shown in the following image. The law of closure states that we complete an image or figure, even if that figure has breaks within it. If an image is mostly complete, we will fill in the missing gaps, as shown in the following examples. In the first image, we can see the shape of a cube, even though the image is broken and not connected in any way. In the second image, we can still make out a circle or a star, even though the image is also broken. Lastly, the law of common region states that things tend to be grouped together if they are connected within an enclosed region, even if there is another thing within a closer proximity to it, as the following image will demonstrate. In the first image, we considered the 2 different sets of circles that are enclosed within a square to be groups. In the second image, we consider the 2 dots enclosed within the 2 circles to be 2 separate groups, even though there are 2 other dots that are close together. Another field of study that was derived and used to learn more about cognition was computer modeling. Computer modeling helped in development because it provided a model or representation that allowed for new testing through computer programs that could possibly mimic, in a similar fashion, how the brain works and processes information. We can then start moving toward modern cognitive psychology. Within it, we can see roots of behaviorism, experimental psychology, computer modeling, along with other topics. There are many different psychologists who played a huge role into what modern psychology looks like today, and it has continued to be developed to this day. Cognitive psychology had to go through many different transitions, countless trials and errors, and millions of hoops. Today, it is an incredibly important area of study that inspires many and promotes the studies of other areas of psychology. Hi, I'm Karen Lomelli. I wanted to say that I've really enjoyed this course and that I really enjoyed working on this project. I chose the topic of cognitive psychology through different times in history, and I did learn a lot from this particular topic that I guess I never really put much thought into. For example, before this course, I never would have really thought that philosophy was a huge part in cognitive psychology. I probably should have made that connection, but it was really this course that helped me really see how, as time progressed and different subjects progressed, how it all kind of comes together. Another part that I really learned about was how Nazi Germany, how that affected cognitive psychology. And, I would never think to put something like that into the development of cognitive psychology, but it was really interesting to me to see how different events, even historical events that don't really have to do with psychology, come into play to help develop psychology into what it is today. Computer science was another big thing that I never really took in mind and never really realized how much computers actually help us to learn more about our own cognition and how things work, or that we could even test things that have to do with psychology. So that really helped. I took a very big interest in the Gestalt laws. I thought it's funny because as I was reading this, I noticed that I myself do these things that are expected based on the Gestalt laws. And it's very different to be aware of what's going on than to just read about it, learn about it, and then write about it. It's like, oh, these are things that affect me daily. And I really, really, really enjoyed learning about that. So I thought this was a very helpful project. I really enjoyed it. And thank you so much for the course this year. Thank you.